New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani had another meeting with President Trump on Thursday. It was the second time Mamdani has visited the White House since being elected mayor.
He called the meeting, quote, productive as he and Trump discussed making housing more affordable in New York City. And a photo of the two in the Oval Office went pretty viral. In the photo, Trump can be seen holding up a pair of newspapers. One of them is a famous headline from a 1975 issue of the New York Daily News. It reads, quote, Ford to city, drop dead, and was published after then President Gerald Ford refused to bail out NYC as it was on the brink of bankruptcy. The other newspaper in the photo reads, Trump to city, let's build. Mamdani's office confirmed that they created this one to give to Trump as a gift.
Following the meeting, Mamdani's office told reporters that the mayor pitched President Trump on a project that could deliver an estimated 12,000 new units. They say it would mark one of the biggest federal investments in housing in decades.
Now, this meeting was not announced ahead of time. We all were surprised. So when Mamdani posted the photo of him and Trump, it quickly lit up social media. Many people, both on the left and the right, offered praise to Mamdani for seemingly establishing a pretty good relationship with Trump. Republican consultant Frank Luntz said, quote, if Zohran and Trump can work together, the rest of us have no excuse not to do the same. Writer Josh Billinson says, quote, it takes real homework to know that the key to Trump's heart is a fake front page about him from a popular publication for display in his office. And left-wing streamer Hassan Piker writes, quote, let 1,000 Zohrans bloom. The countryside yearns for it.
And there was another development that came out of the meeting. Mamdani says he shared his concerns about a Columbia University student who was detained by ICE, triggering protests on the school's campus. Mamdani then confirmed after the meeting that Trump agreed to release the student. He wrote on X, quote, just got off the phone with President Trump. In our meeting earlier, I shared my concerns about Columbia student Elima Aguwava, who was detained by ICE this morning. He just informed me that she will be released imminently.
Now, Aguyeva later posted on her personal Instagram saying, quote, I am safe and okay, and adding that she was in complete shock from the experience.
I feel bad for her. I really butchered her name there.
It's okay. We were all trying to figure it out before the show. Let's just start with Mamdani, because I think people get confused about the way that politics work, right? There is never a time I can remember in my adult or younger life where there wasn't variety of different people with variety of different perspectives that had enough power to either stop a law from passing or pushing it through. And so working across the aisle is something that you have to do, no matter how much you don't like the president or whomever is in charge in that capacity. So I think what Mamdani is doing is really smart. He has a lot of tact. And I think that what the president is doing is really smart because Mamdani and young people are interested in what the new in the future looks like. And it can't look like these older people that are stuck in their ways that are not doing anything. I mean, Congress has been polled as the most ineffective branch of government for years.
It earns it.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm trying to make anybody feel any grace for that. But Mamdani is representing like a new era. Like, I can talk tough just as you. I don't have to make it my whole life to talk about you on social media. I mean, Newsom's going a different route, and I think it's hilarious, by the way, but he's going
into that.
He's going a different route. But Mamdani, he did it during the campaign when it was necessary for him to punch back or even start with Trump. And now he's like, okay, I need to get to work. And so working requires conversation.
It does. And that's one thing. I will give Zohran Mamdani credit. The man knows the audience. He knows his audience. He shows up to Trump. And even when they're having the first meeting at the White House, the president, he was like, well, and Mamdani's like, oh, you can say it, but he's a socialist, right? Like, they had a good banter already. It was clear that they had been able to kind of break that down. And so to see him show up with a prop for the president, yes, know your audience, know who you're trying to sell your message to. And so I give him all the credit in the world in that. They clearly don't agree on much.
Right.
But it also shows Democrats that when you put your big boy pants on and you call the White House and you engage in a conversation with the president, you can change outcomes. And it doesn't even have to be a Democrat. It can be Muriel Bowser, right? She said, President Trump, come on in, step in. You can send the National Guard here. We could use the help. And crime came down in Washington, D.C. You can say that about Governor Kelly Ayotte up in New Hampshire, who is a Republican, but who called the White House, engaged the White House and the president, and said, we don't want an ICE DHS holding facility here in New Hampshire. And what do you know? It didn't happen. For all of the hysterics of the Tim Walzes and the Gavin Newsoms and the thirsty 30 trying to run for 2028 in the Democrat Party, if they actually wanted to lead, all you got to do is phone the White House.
And I think that's a valid perspective, that the people that have some people look at it as bend the knee or just do their job, give a call, have had pretty effective communication with the president. But I also think as the leader of our country, right, sometimes the president can also pick up the phone. And I would urge for Republicans to hold him to task on that and not make such drastic decisions. Robbie and I go back and forth about who started it with sanctuary cities and why we're in this position in Minnesota. But at the same time, if he just would have called Walz, it seems like they had that conversation way too late. And Tom Homan stepped in. And why did they have that then?
Because
why have it on social media for all of us to decipher?
Because Tim Walz didn't know his audience. Compared to Zohran, who doesn't go bombastic after the president, he has a conversation. That's the difference. Tim Walz immediately and Jacob Fry went in front of the camera, started throwing out expletives, losing their ever-loving mind, and allowing riots to reign in these cities. And so for them to sit there and say, like, well, why isn't the White House talking to me? Because the first point of conversation you had with the president was to call him a bigot and a racist and be horrible to him. If you called him and just had that sideline conversation, but Democrats are so thirsty for the grandstanding, for the clip, that they can put into a fundraising email.
If the president would have called them, then two American citizens might not be dead right now, right? So if
Tim Walz had enforced law and order in his city, those citizens would not be dead. But what he allowed was violent riots and people to impede legal law enforcement actions and efforts in this country. My heart breaks for people who lose loved ones. That is a terribly difficult thing. No American should have to die. That is a hard stop. Tim Walz is the exact reason why those two people are dead, not Donald Trump.
I think when Tom Homan goes to Minnesota and largely pulls out ICE agents there and says, here we are, I'm restructuring what we're doing, and we have he says vaguely agreed upon some terms. And Tim Walz is telling us, what have you agreed upon? Because the jails and the prisons are operating in the same way.
It sounds like nobody talks to Tim Walz.
Well, it seems like, but it's saying that nothing changed is what he's saying about our policy. We were holding people up to 2 weeks in prisons for the federal government anyway.
But they weren't letting them into the facilities to get the people.
But they're saying that's not true.
So they have to just wait outside for 2 weeks.
No, they're saying that's not true.
They walk into their hands like, gotcha this time.
They're saying nothing is changing about the policy. So for Tim Walz to now evacuate the city, now we're going by he says, she said, and they're still there. And if you're saying that the adamant behavior and the online tough talk is what made us get to this point of no return, we're still there because they're saying nothing changed.
It's not the point of no return, though. It's not the point of no return because Tom Homan went in and changed the strategy. You can't say it's the point of no return because we've seen this administration step in, and make changes when they needed to. So
create the problem and send the solution is a terrible thing.
No, create the problem.
Create the problem by sending ICE.
I'm sorry, how many millions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse have we seen in Minnesota just within this year come to light? And then they allow these violent riots. But you said the president likes to
conflate every issue. Can we separate those two? Because waste, fraud, and abuse was happening after the pandemic across the country. A lot of people are in jail for it right now.
Yeah,
right, in every
absolutely.
state.
But billions and billions of dollars in Minnesota, and when the president says step up and clean it up, Tim Walz begins to grandstand again to try to run for president. If he wants to be a leader, Tim Walz, he better step up and start acting like it, because all he is doing is trying to drive clicks, drive headlines, and get low dollar donors to try to fuel him to run again in 2028. It's so politically motivated. If he cared about the safety of his community, he would allow federal law enforcement to do their job with local law enforcement. And instead, he told local law enforcement to stand down while DHS and ICE were doing their job, and it led to violent riots. If they want security, they need to step up.
I've been critical of Tim Walz and extremely critical of Fry, but I also think that the president has to act like a president sometimes and just be the big kid.
I mean, he did. He sent Tom Homan in.
Yeah, as Tom Homan comes in and is adamantly doing something totally different than the president has done this whole time. To decide that after two Americans died, he sends Tom Homan in. I just feel like it's a little late to send Tom Homan in.
Well, Tim Walz should have done a better job of sending law enforcement into his community to protect his citizens, and instead he allowed violent riots and people to get in and impeding law enforcement. That woman hit that officer with a vehicle.
We're still looking into that.
I don't know what you mean. Look into it.
We're trying to have an impartial investigation look into it, and the federal government is impeding that process.
No, they are allowing Minnesota people to be involved in this, but it is
after weeks of going back and forth, right?
Jurisdiction. It is federal jurisdiction. So them getting in it is them getting in the way, which all of a sudden now Tim Walz wants law enforcement involved when before, they can't help anything at the federal level.
But transparency has to be key to this whole thing, right? The American public is watching how we handle immigration. The American public was extremely critical of Biden, saying they wanted immigration reform. The American public has been polled a lot about this a lot lately, saying they don't like the tactics that ICE is currently using. So we have to take that all into account, and they want to see what happened. So whether we come up with an impartial investigation and say Renee Good hit the officer, whether we come up with an impartial investigation and say Alex Preddy was killed for no reason, we need to have these impartial investigations come to fruition so we can all understand what happened there.
But that doesn't mean that the local law enforcement has jurisdiction over a federal investigation.
All right, we'll leave it there. FBI Director Kash Patel revealing Thursday that his phone records were subpoenaed by the Biden DOJ. His response is coming up. Stay with us.